Good afternoon to those of you that have already joined us. Thank you so much for joining us for our second webinar of 2022. A big welcome to all of you. We're really excited to be launching the second webinar of our series this year. And as usual, we're going to give the other participants and the delegates a few more minutes to sign in and join us as well. And while we're waiting for them, I think everyone is very accustomed to Zoom webinars by now. So while we are waiting, please feel free to say hello in the chat, tell us where you're from, and remember that there are two ways that you can actually communicate with us as panelists. So you'll see an option for Q&A, and you'll also see an option for chat. You're very welcome to use either of those functionalities. We'll make sure to read your comments and your questions as well. Speaking of which, we did invite you to submit questions to our panel for discussion today. Thank you very much to those of you that have submitted questions. We've got some really interesting questions. And those of you that did not get an opportunity to do so, you're very welcome to submit your questions now, either in the chat function or in the Q&A function. So we see we have some responses from Kenya, from Vereeniging, Pretoria, Western Cape, Johannesburg. Wow, the responses are just flying in. While people are joining, maybe I can tell you a little bit about our panel today. So I think those of you that have joined us previously, you might be accustomed to seeing myself or my colleague Caitlin presenting these webinars. And sorry to disappoint you if you were looking forward to one of us. So one of us is not going to be presenting today, but we have actually pulled out the big guns for today's webinar. We are really excited and really privileged to have with us Cindy Norcott. So very briefly, in way of introduction, Cindy's a motivational speaker, a business coach, and the CEO of recruitment agencies called Pro Appointments, as well as Pro Talent. Cindy is also the founder and chairperson of a well-known charity called the Robin Hood Foundation. In addition to this, as if that wasn't enough, you might also know Cindy as the the author of the best-selling business books, How to Be Unstoppable, as well as How Does She Do It? We'll tell you more about these books a little bit later on. There's also an opportunity for you to get your hands on those two books as well. Our second illustrious panelist is Benjamin Buckingham. I think certainly not a name that you're unfamiliar with. Benjamin usually is in the background for these types of events, but we've decided this time we're putting Benjamin in the spotlight. Benjamin is the founder of Lumenii in South Africa. So back in the days when we were known as HFM Talent Index. Benjamin actually comes from an engineering and technical type of background, but has become so enamored by talent management that he decided to change course completely, and now is extremely knowledgeable and extremely experienced in all areas of talent management. And combining this with his immense entrepreneurial experience and skill, he's going to be sharing some insights with us as well today. So those are our two panel members today. And I'm sure you're all really looking forward to listening to them and also getting the insights and some of your questions as well. Okay, I see we still have people joining: Johannesburg, Cape Town, Durban. Okay. A little bit about our agenda. 5 minutes for introductions. I think I probably used up my 5 minutes. You all know me. I'm Jaintheran Naidoo. I'm one of the directors here at Lumenii, and you might have known me from previous webinars as well. Okay. I'm then going to hand over to our keynote speaker, Cindy. Cindy's going to share some of her thoughts and insights with us. And thereafter, we're going to hear from our MD, Benjamin Buckingham. We have set aside time for the panel to address some questions and comments that you have submitted to us as well. And that will be towards the end of the session. We are unlikely to get through all of the questions that are submitted, but we do undertake to provide each of you with a written response to your question. And we will be sharing all of those questions with everyone that has signed in or has signed up for the webinar this afternoon. Okay, I'll just quickly have a look. Here, people from sunny Cape Town, more people from Pretoria, from Pietermaritzburg as well. Welcome to everyone. Remember, if you haven't submitted a question, please do so. Okay, Cape Town, there's more from Cape Town. So Cape Town very well represented here today. Okay, Marla from Cape Town, welcome Marla. And we have someone from Zimbabwe, Harare, Zimbabwe. Okay, I think we've allowed a sufficient time for everyone to join us today. So I'm sure you're all eagerly waiting to hear from Cindy. So as I mentioned, Cindy is the author of 2 best-selling books, How to Be Unstoppable and How Does She Do It? Cindy has very generously made some of these books available for us to actually give away to our attendees this afternoon. And I have been given that task to decide who actually gets those books. So I think I'm going to base it on the contribution, the comments, and the questions that I see in the chat. So please, if you'd like to receive one of those books, let me know how eager you are by contributing on the chat, and we'll make sure to get one of those books to you. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Cindy. Cindy, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. I'm really, really excited to chat to you today. I'm assuming that many of you on this call are people who are either owners of small businesses or medium-sized businesses. And I just wanted to give you a little bit of an update as to what is happening in the sphere of recruitment right now, because the world has changed a lot in the last 3 years. I'm a firm believer that staff are your greatest assets, especially the right staff. But for many of us, I think sometimes what we do is we maybe approach recruitment as a little bit of a shotgun affair. And I want to just chat to you about how things have changed. I want to talk to you about your employee value proposition, and then on how to retain staff, because I think that is really the antidote to recruitment, is to keep the people you've got, the good people you've got. So for me, what I've realized is for many of you, recruitment is not your core function. You own a business, you run a business, you have many other roles, and recruitment therefore is one part of your job. But what I've realized is many companies in the last 2 years haven't done much recruiting because with COVID, with the economy, a lot of people have actually stopped hiring, or they started reducing staff. So I think for a lot of people, they've become a little bit rusty in the field of recruitment. So I just wanted to discuss the current landscape with you. So at the moment, since COVID, we've noticed a global move. It's been the Great Resignation. I'm sure you've all heard of this concept, but what does it mean? I think what happened is, you know, during the time where people stayed away from work and were told to stay at home, many people for the first time ever consciously looked at their work-life balance, and they looked at their lives and went, oh my gosh, I spend all my time traveling, commuting, I work at an office, and I never see my family. So you had a lot of people going, wait, there must be a new way, a different way, a better way of living. So what's happened is a lot of people have decided they don't want to spend their time in the traffic. They don't want to be told work is not a place, it's a function. So a lot of people have moved they're thinking about what work actually is, especially candidates. So many candidates are now saying they want flexibility. What they really want is they want autonomy. They don't want to be told what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. I think they're moving into space of wanting to be more responsible for the results of their work rather than all the inputs. As a recruiter, we often approach candidates on a daily and hourly basis and tell them about wonderful opportunities. Can I tell you, the first thing that they ask 90% of the time is it a remote role or is it a flexible role? If it's not, that is where many of them immediately stop and say, we are not interested, thank you. And what we found is a lot of our clients are saying as well, if it's flexible or remote, then we will pay less, and it's not working. Candidates are saying, I want flexibility and I want to be paid what I'm worth. So we've seen this phenomenon, but it's also coupled with the global skills shortage. And a lot of employers, I think, are under the misperception that, you know, there's so much unemployment, it should be easy to find staff. But we really are facing a critical shortage of really good talent everywhere. So, you know, it really is an issue. One thing I wanted to say as well is talented people are interviewing you too. You know, in the past, it was always a power balance where the employer had all the power. They'd almost sit in a higher seat. Applicants would sit on the other side of the desk begging for an opportunity to work at the company. And if you think about it, in the past, when an employer at the end of the interview would say, do you have any questions? Candidates very seldom had questions. Now it's very, very different. Candidates are Googling your company. They are asking their friends about your business, and they are very, very intentional and clear about the brands they want to work for, and they're very clear on what they want out of a job. And if they are scarce skills, and I'm talking people who are highly qualified in certain sectors, finance, IT, engineering, even sales, if these people are great, they're going to want to have they want to move to something that is significantly better than what they've got. Otherwise, they'd rather stay where they are. So what we're seeing is that now I am on LinkedIn as a recruiter. LinkedIn is my space. My staff are on LinkedIn all day. Every single week, my staff are being contacted on LinkedIn, and they are being asked, are you happy? We see your profile. We think you're amazing. Would you like a job? So I think for many employers, they don't realize that this is actually happening. So I think it's something to consider is, is there a business risk for my small or medium business that my staff could be poached from me at any time? Am I aware of it? And have I had discussions with my staff? Have I conducted stay interviews? And I really encourage you to do this. Asking people, why do you stay? What will help you stay? How can I help you win? What can make your work experience better? Now, this is a complete mind shift from us always having been the employer with all the power and, that take it or leave it mindset. That has completely had to disappear in the workplace as well. Also, if you are offering a candidate a job and a new package, a small paltry increase of 500 Rand or 800 Rand is not going to cut it. We are finding candidates are concerned for economic stability in this interesting market that we're in. So if they are going to make that move to your company, it's got to be significantly more. So what we are seeing is so many clients are battling to get the candidate over the line because they're going, well, I'm offering you 1,000 Rand more. And the candidate's saying it's not enough. It's not worth my while to actually take this role. What we've realized in recruitment is time kills deals. So the longer the process is, the more you're going to lose out on candidates. So I see that there are some companies, they're making people jump through hoops. They'll do 2 or 3 interviews, 2 or 3 assessments over a 2 or 3 week period. They will then get them to do a working interview, a video, and all these things. And eventually they go, we're not sure. And this is where candidates will actually lose interest in your company and they will withdraw their applications. We're seeing that more and more and more. So if you make them work too much, they will choose not to look at your company. We've got some people who say, well, the candidate must do so many things, and then the candidates are not prepared to do that. So what I would say is, where are companies going wrong? Where are smaller companies going wrong with hiring? I think what we tend to do when we have a small business is we fight the urgent, we deal with the firefighting, what's urgent. So somebody resigns and we immediately have a knee-jerk reaction, let's hire. But my suggestion, and this is where most companies are going, is to create a talent pipeline. So for instance, in your business, if you have a high turnover area, say for instance, it's sales, often it's in entry-level jobs, call center. Now, you always need people in that category. And you might have a full complement right now, but always be hiring. Your website should say we are hiring. And I would include that on your to-do list to constantly be proactively hiring, always having somebody waiting in the wings for when that new opportunity presents itself, rather than doing that knee-jerk reaction. And, they always say hire slowly, fire quickly. But like I've said, it's almost counterintuitive because I've just said, if you hire too slowly, you're going to miss out on the great talent. So that's why we want to do it as a proactive role rather than a reactive thing. So I would also encourage you, try not take too long in each process. Recruitment's not speed dating. It's not about a 30-minute interview and saying you're fine. We have to do a lot more than that. So I see recruitment as about a 12-piece puzzle. So you can imagine you've got to, look through the CVs and vet through the CVs, maybe do a telephonic screening call, maybe ask the candidate to send a quick intro video, maybe do another an in-person or Zoom interview, followed by another interview. And I'd encourage you to have somebody else in your organization doing that interview. When you do references, don't just phone people that they've suggested, phone people that they haven't. And ask people why. You were 5 years at this company, why don't you want me to contact that manager? And I would still phone people that they say don't phone, because I'd want to get the true story about the person. So I would also suggest social media stalking. So what I would suggest is going onto their LinkedIn, their Facebook, their Instagram, just to see how the person conducts themselves. Is there a similar values that is being presented in that space? When you interview them as well, question what they know about your company. I'm always concerned when a candidate says, oh, what do you people do here? They haven't done the Googling, they haven't checked out the company, because every company wants somebody who wants to work for them. And then I want to just mention the employee value proposition. Why would somebody want to work at your company? At the moment, there's this massive trend where companies are trying to become employers of choice and cool companies to work for. And many of us in small and medium companies don't have the luxury of having a budget to have chill rooms and boxing bags and bean bags and table tennis and cake every day. So what can you offer that isn't gimmicky, but that is something that people would really, really value? So maybe you've got a coaching style in your business, or maybe there are loads of opportunities to develop and grow. But I mean, in our company, it's so simple and silly in some ways, but every second Friday, everyone leaves at 12:30. There's free popcorn, there's good coffee, there's loads of cake all the time. But I know it's silly, but I think we need to have that USP when we are looking at candidates. So years ago, most of us in business, the biggest thing, our biggest challenge was, how do we make more sales? How do we get more clients? I think that's pretty much shifted for many of us in business to, how do we retain our talent? The longer we can keep great people with us, the more stable our businesses are. So I think it's so important to ask, what are we offering a person that would attract them? Or what would make somebody at a braai on a Saturday night say to a friend, you should apply to our company? And I think that's something we need to look at and go, have we actually done the work to promote ourselves and to position ourselves in the best light and to create a great employee experience? We always focus on customers, but we need to focus on staff. And then lastly, just talent retention is paramount. If we can stop having people leave out the back door, we don't have to keep putting more people in the front door. And it starts with the experience with your business from the get-go, from the interview, how they perceive the company, their first day, their first week. Do you have an induction plan? Do you have organograms, job descriptions, well-written contracts? How do people feel? What happens if people are quite different to the people you already have? Is your culture welcoming? Is it adaptable? Some companies, what they do is they have this theory that, you fit into us because this is our culture. That isn't really how culture is working anymore. Culture needs to be malleable and permeable, where it means that any new person who comes in has an impact on the culture. They are able to have an impact on the culture. Otherwise, we will never, ever have diversity in our businesses. And I think things that we have to look at for retention is, are we paying fairly? Are we treating people fairly? Do we give people benefits that they value? Are there learning opportunities? Is leadership got a coaching style? Are they approachable? And things that people really, really want. They want recognition. And for the millennials, they want feedback. They want to know how they're doing, and they want to know it often. So for me, I think an important thing to do is to create a workplace where people feel that it's a safe place to land, that there's a presence of trust, so that if people are working in a hybrid or flexible manner, that they feel that they are trusted and there's no micromanagement. I think that's important. And yeah, I think another last point on retention is to create an environment where high morale is the order of the day, and that when you look at the culture, you go, this is attracting people. This is keeping them here. We have a really, really awesome experience for our staff. And I think those are things that maybe people have never thought of in the past, and I think that have become important elements now when looking for staff, looking at hiring and retaining staff. So I hope that's been of value. Thank you.
Cindy, thank you very much. Certainly a very unique perspective. So Cindy is both a client, has as clients both organizations that are hiring as well as individuals looking for jobs. So certainly some very interesting perspectives from those two unique points of view, Cindy. Thank you very much. And I can see that our audience is loving what you're saying. The comments and the questions are pouring in. Unfortunately, we're not going to get to all of them, but I certainly will try and discuss some of them later on in our session. Thank you very much, Cindy. We're going to move on to Benjamin. Benjamin also brings us very unique perspectives. So firstly, as an entrepreneur himself that has hired and fired lots of individuals in his time, but then also as a strategic talent partner to some of his clients today as well. So Benjamin, over to you.
Thank you, Jaintheran. Thank you, Cindy. I found that extremely interesting. I think that the concept of stay interviews and the fact that time kills deals is really, really relevant. I must say that I'm absolutely going to be picking up on some of those points. Yeah, maybe the place to start is a small introduction. First of all, I think it's wonderful how many people have been interested in this webinar. We've certainly had the most sign-ups to any webinar that we've presented. So obviously there's a definite need for answering some of the questions in this space. So, by way of a small introduction to Lumenii, just to give you a little bit of a sense of what we do as a business. So I'm the managing director, as Jaintheran has mentioned, and Lumenii, what we do is we partner with organizations, we partner with our clients, and we really help them get the best out of their talent. And the way that we do this is, on one hand, we've got a very sophisticated talent measuring platform where we get really great insights into talent. And then on the other side, we've got a team of psychologists and HR professionals that work with our partners, and we really help them with talent management across the board. And a lot of these points cover what Cindy was reflecting on, things like identifying and keeping talent, about ensuring effectiveness, and also concepts like longer term planning. So as a business, what we have traditionally done is we've traditionally worked with larger clients, but now recently we're moving more into the SME space. And what we want to do is we've put together some of our learnings, basically, that come from our experiences that we feel are relevant and could be of value within the SME space. So it's the SME challenge, basically. The need for talent, the need for people is the same. So as SMEs, SMEs have got exactly the same need for great people that large corporates have. The thing is that the difference is that within the context of a smaller organization, the impact of one person is much bigger. So I'm sure we all have experienced that one poor hire where we've brought somebody toxic into the organization, and what a big impact that's got on our time, on leadership time, or also the loss of one great employee. So as SMEs, what we need to do is we need to compete for the same talent, but with fewer resources and often with much smaller teams. So the question is, how do we go about competing with the Goliaths? So what we've done is we've pulled together 8 key learnings or best practices, and we're hoping that you're going to perhaps find value in 1 or 2 of them. Maybe 1 or 2 of them will be something that you'd like to think about. Also, what we've done is we've put together a couple of resources, a couple of free resources to support that, which I'll be sharing with you. One of the key sort of principles that you're going to see is that part of the key is to leverage technology as much as possible. Talent management has really, really moved on in the last couple of years. And what we see is that things that used to take large amounts of time, large amounts of resources are actually being done at a fraction of the cost, at a fraction of the time, and actually being done with significantly better quality. So one of the main antidotes is definitely looking to technology to fill that gap of budget and people. So starting with the first key learning that we've seen, and this very much links to what Cindy was saying about the change in the balance of power. You have to treat candidates like clients. You know, the bottom line is that the skills shortage is real. So it's very important that we build our employee value proposition right from the start, right from the recruitment, right from the attraction phase. And so within the context of the recruitment process, one of the key things that we see is actually selling the organization to the candidate, because basically in this market, skilled employees are spoiled for choice. So in effect, they are choosing you. So in that, it's very important to highlight the benefits, the advantages, the opportunities that are available in the business, because candidates are literally choosing. And then the second main point, and this is a result of the impact of the third industrial revolution, where everything's become automated, is we have to bring back the humanity. You know, what's happened is there have been lots of processes that automatically sift through things and actually end up forgetting the person. And while technology supports us, it's very important that we treat candidates with the requisite respect that they deserve, the same respect that we give our clients. And these are principles like having realistic timeframes, respecting those timeframes, getting back to candidates with feedback, setting clear expectations, not asking people to jump through hoops, providing the sorts of flexibility that Cindy was mentioning earlier, and making sure that people's needs are met over and above their need for money. So the bottom line is how we treat people in the recruitment phase, whether they are hired or whether they are not hired by us, really comes back to impact us. And it's very important to build that employee value proposition right from the start. So the second point that we've definitely learned over the last couple of years is absolutely in line with the principle of time kills deals. It's very important to set yourself up to hire quickly. And so that's not to rush, and that's not making bad decisions, but what you need to do is you need to set yourself up to make good decisions as fast as possible. Scaling up a business absolutely depends on effective hiring, and the inability to hire effectively hampers growth. So if we look at average hiring times, and this is just average, we see lots of processes with significantly longer timeframes. The bottom line is that time is risk. Time kills deals. Time costs money. There's the opportunity loss or the opportunity cost of having an empty seat. There's the real risk of losing candidates to a competitor if we take them too long, if we're asking them to jump through too many hoops. And also what we do by stretching out recruitment processes is we do erode our perceived brand in the market. So what we see in larger organizations is that they generally have regularized repeating hiring and other HR processes. And the question is, how do we match this from the perspective of an SME? So the one point, and I will reiterate what Cindy was mentioning, is to maintain a talent pipeline. For roles where it's possible, continuously hire, continuously look for skill, continuously look for talent. Then the second point is to reduce as many manual steps as possible in the process. Focus on what really counts and remove unnecessary points. Don't do too many unnecessary things. Don't make the candidate wait for too many waiting points. And one of the main ways of doing this is to have clear criteria of what you are looking for a particular role. Now set the bar high, have high expectations, but then when you find somebody that meets those expectations, hire them. Don't wait to the end. Don't wait for the next 3 weeks to find that you're actually going to lose that person that's got everything that you need in order to be effective at the role. So for me, this particular learning, not to overvalue experience in education, is probably the most important lesson that I've learned. So what I've learned is that what we see is that each method or each thing that we do in order to make a decision about whether to hire somebody or not has got some degree of validity or some degree of predictability. And it's difficult to see that on a case-by-case basis. So if you're hiring one person or two people at a time, that is not enough of volume to see what the actual effectiveness of a particular process is. But fortunately, we've got access to studies and to large sets of data where we get insight into how effective different types of perspectives are. And so what we've got here is, if I can get this to work. Sorry. There we go. What we've got here is we've got some data from a study. This is a very large study that was done over 85 years of longitudinal data. And those numbers are mathematical correlations. And what they show is how well that particular element relates to job performance in the long run. And the lower the number, the worse the relationship. So 0 would be no relationship, and a number of 1 would be a completely 100% linked relationship. So what we can see there is that items that are sort of learnt have got a relatively modest to low correlation ultimately with job success. What we find though is that if we look at concepts of innate potential, so some predispositional and some other constructs such as cognitive ability and learning agility, what we see is there's actually quite a high relationship between those items or those traits of individuals and ultimate role success. Now, I mean, it's a bit of a long story, but what does this mean? What this means is that we are madly looking for people with skill and people with education, where at the end of the day, it's not the best thing to look for in order to look for successful employees. What we find is that we can actually find people with little to no skill with these innate traits that can very quickly become very effective at the job. And this is really one of the main antidotes to the skills shortage, is that skills can be quickly learnt by people with innate ability. Whereas if we spend our time and resource looking for skill, we might be very much hiring somebody that does not have that innate ability and is not going to grow in the organization as we expect. And I think the other advantage there is that there's so much more capacity available in the market, and also the costs of hiring people without or with less experience are much lower. So then, how do we go about doing that? So what we generally do as human beings is we rely on the things that we can see. And we've all done this. We've all, within the recruitment process, myself included, we've met somebody, we get a good feeling, they tell us a good joke, we like them, we get on, and we think they're the right person based on that feeling, and we hire them. And that is sometimes the biggest mistake that can be made in recruitment. So what we need to do is, this is a model, it's the iceberg model. And so those things that are visible in a person, being their skills and behavior, are supported underwater by a number of traits and characteristics that aren't directly observable. But these things can be measured. There's numerous different ways to measure these things. But these things can be measured, or these traits and characteristics can be measured, and they can also very effectively be related to role success. So what we are finding is happening more and more is that organizations that are looking at these objective measurements first have got more access to talent and are making better decisions, because what they're doing is they're first looking at objective metrics that give a high degree of relationship with success. And then they're looking at the equally important subjective perspectives. The subjective perspectives are very, very important, but what we don't want to do is we don't want to bring in those biases right at the beginning. We want to look at things subjectively once we've got a good sense of the objective relationship with success. Another area where we see very big improvements in the quality of talent is when organizations are using competencies or using competency libraries. And some people are comfortable with them, some people find them overwhelming, but really a competency it's something that's observable, it's measurable, it's about knowledge, skills, and attributes, and it can be related to effective performance in a job. And why does it make such a difference to be working with competencies? And the reason it makes a difference is that it gives us a structured way of communicating across different processes what's important for a particular role. So it basically creates a common language. And when we have that common language, what we realize is it's actually only a handful of things that really matter for any given role. So what we can do is we can bring our focus onto those things that are really important. And this plays back into having a fast process. And we can focus on those things that are important. We cannot get too distracted by the noise. And what we can also do is we can use this language or this perspective for various parts of the process, for recruitment, for interviewing, for measurement, and then also in other parts of talent management, such as in development, as well as longer term planning. So on this, what we've done is we are going to make our competency library that is globally available. It's in use in a number of very large organizations across the globe, as well as organizations in South Africa. And we're going to be making that available for free to you. It's going to be available online, no strings attached. You're welcome to use it without any obligations. It's got the 45 competencies that we use across our clients, and it includes things like the definitions and the behaviors and all the elements that you need in order to implement an effective competency library if you don't have one. So one of the areas that we spend the most time in recruitment is in interviews. We really see a lot of time being invested by large parts of the organizations in the interview process, which is great. It's very, very important. But what we find is that when we look at the research, and this is our experience very much empirically as well, is that by bringing structure to the interview, what we do is we improve the relationship of that interview with a good outcome significantly, from a modest correlation to a relatively strong correlation. And the reason for that is that doing a structured interview, like a competency-based interview, is actually a way of measuring innate potential. It's one of the methods of measuring innate potential. And what an interview like this does is, once we know the competencies, we can then structure our interview questions around the core competencies for the role. And a competency-based interview question is a question that's been very cleverly designed to be open-ended, so it's not a yes or no question. And it's also been designed to elicit evidence, and that's both positive and negative evidence of what this candidate has done and how they have acted in a particular scenario. Everybody makes mistakes. People don't like admitting their mistakes in the interview context. But what's very interesting is to understand how somebody has dealt with those things that they've got wrong in life. And these types of questions give us those sorts of insights. The other thing about competency-based interviews or structured interviews is that they are measurement-based. So they can be scored. There's a key to score them. They can be scored by different people in the same interview and compared afterwards. We can compare the same scores and the same notes across different candidates. And you can see there that why bringing the structure into the interview process really does add a lot of value and a lot of predictive validity to the process. And so also we feel this one is so important that what we've done for this webinar is we've created a competency-based interview guide for you for a leadership role. and that will be freely available to you too after this webinar, and you're welcome to take it and copy it and edit it, use it as a template if you like, but that's something that we feel we'd like to make available if you'd like to use it. So then getting on to retention. So what is it? What makes somebody want to stay? Why do people stay? Well, it really, and I've been focusing on the selection element a bit more, is because it really starts with bringing in people that fit into the organization, fit the role, fit the culture, fit the values. But once somebody's in the organization, what sorts of questions do we ask? What the three main questions to ask is, in terms of their role, do they get the role? Do they want the role? Do they get it? Do they want it? And can they do it? And when we say get it, that doesn't really mean do they get the tasks of the role, but do they really intrinsically get what it is they're doing, why, and how it contributes overall to the organization? Do they want it? Are they motivated to do the role? Does it bring them energy? Do they wake up in the morning excited about this role? That's one of the key elements of stickiness. And can they do it? Do they have the time, the capacity, the resource, and the ability to do what they need to do? If they can't do their role effectively, that also brings in disengagement. And then there's the very big question, and again, what Cindy was touching on, it's what do employees want? It's not just money. What people want is actually quite complex. If we look at what motivates people, we look at things like success. People are motivated by responsibility, by independence, by flexibility, by the ability to grow, creativity. So there's lots of different things that motivate people. And what's very important is to ask questions and understand what somebody's looking for, and to ensure that what we offer actually meets their internal needs as a human being. And that really improves the desire for somebody to want to stay. And then the last main learning of ours is that when we look at retention, it's very much a multifaceted puzzle. There isn't a single silver bullet to solve retention. There's a number of different things to look at. And so what we've done here is we've listed a few. But as I said in the last slide, it really does start with a good fit. So it is important to, when one is hiring, is to hire to retain. And if you that's the way to start thinking going forward. And then everyone that you bring in is going to, we're going to make sure that they fit well. But then also, once somebody is in the organization, it's very important that there's space for feedback. People need to be able to communicate, that there needs to be openness and honesty. There needs to be reciprocal communication, the giving and receiving of feedback. And it's very important that people can do something with the feedback. And then secondly, there needs to be access to opportunity and longer-term career paths. People need to understand that there is opportunity for their growth in the organization, and that opportunity is real and that it can be achieved and they will be supported. And if people can understand that they can achieve their personal goals in the context of the organization, they're far less likely to look for other greener pastures. So yeah, those are the points. As I've said, we've got these resources. We'll be sharing this afterwards, but we're going to be making that competency library available to you with the competencies and the behaviors. We'll write an article about how to use it. Also, we've got the structured interview guide, which you are free to download and edit and use as you wish. Also, there are lots of competency-based interview questions available on the internet. They're very easy to Google, so that's probably a good place to look. Or you're always welcome to ask us for some more. Very grateful for Cindy giving some of her copies of her book away. I think this is also a very, very valuable resource. And then obviously, we are available, and I'm sure Cindy will make herself available too, if anyone's got any questions that, that can help them on this journey. But thank you.
Thank you very much, Benjamin, for that very practical yet very powerful advice. So freely shared with everyone and resonating really well with our attendees. Lots of comments flying in, people really agreeing with what you're saying about attitude and skill versus experience, also loving the fact that we are focusing on competencies and structured interviews and so on. So we've had tons of questions coming in. And like I said before, we're definitely not going to get through all of them, but I'm definitely going to try and pick out the ones that are looking interesting and as diverse as possible. But maybe just to ease us into our question session, a question that has come through more than once that relates quite nicely to what you've said about get it, want it, and can do it, Benjamin. Somebody has asked us, does one prioritize skill or attitude when employing for the lower management tier?
Yeah, very, very good question. So when somebody moves into management, the set of skills that they need is actually generally quite different from what they need in their current job. So what we look for is we want to promote people that are already performing in the current job, or in the current role, but their attitude, and when we talk about attitude, it's their innate predisposition, their drive and their desire to be in that management role is probably more important than the skill, because if they've got the right attitude and the right traits, they're much more likely to learn that skill and learn it quickly, and then be a much more effective manager than if you just look at skill alone.
Yeah, thank you very much. You might have some candidates saying outright, I have no interest in being a manager. On the other hand, you might have candidates that might not have the right sort of motivational fit for that position, which we need to try and weed out and identify as early as possible. Cindy, perhaps the next question you can give us your thoughts on. And I'm just quickly looking for my question again. So one of our attendees has commented on the point about social media and reviewing an individual social media. And the question is, there's such a big debate on whether this is fair or not, as there is their work life versus their personal life. Can you provide a strong argument why this is an okay thing to do?
Jaintheran, I always get pushback when I speak to young job seekers, especially those at universities and even in high school, where they say that's an invasion of their privacy. I think the company argument is that when you have staff who work for your company, they are essentially an extension of your brand. So when they are putting posts on social media that are unpleasant or unethical or unpopular or sort of not very savory, it can have a direct impact on your business. So I think what you want is not just a culture fit, but maybe more of a values fit. If this person is doing things that are in line with your interests, that's wonderful. And I think a lot of employers are looking at people's social media. So my suggestion is, if somebody doesn't like the way people might perceive their social media, then make it private. It's very, very simple. But I think one of the guidelines has been, would you like your potential employer to see it, your parents, your pastor, and your principal? And I think often people are valuing the popularity more than their privacy. So I think sometimes it also shows, to be honest, in my opinion, it shows sometimes a certain immaturity when people do post knee-jerk reaction comments and things that are unsavory. So I think it can tell people a lot about the person behind the scenes, and you don't find this on LinkedIn. You'll find it on TikTok, or you'll find it on Instagram or Facebook, not on LinkedIn normally. Most people are quite circumspect. And remember, we are looking for people with a brand, and we want to see that beautiful golden thread of consistency in the brand. We don't want to see this beautiful suited up individual on LinkedIn and then this crazy person on another forum.
Thank you, Cindy. I think both you and Benjamin have mentioned more than once the importance of treating the candidate with respect and humanizing the workplace again. But I think it works both ways. I think candidates also have a responsibility, just as much as the organization does as well, in creating a brand that is appealing to employers. Benjamin, I'm going to put you back on the hot seat. We've had a very focused question here. There's been lots of interest around flexibility, learning and relearning, and so on. And one of our attendees has asked, how does one assess learning agility, or how do we gauge the probability of one's learning agility, especially when we need to place lesser emphasis on experience and qualifications?
Yeah, very good question. Traditionally, learning agility was measured by taking various people's perspectives, or a 360-degree perspective. But what we find now is that learning agility is actually made up more of those traits underneath the water of the iceberg. And so the most effective way to measure learning agility is by measuring it using online assessments. And so that's generally the first step, is to get a perspective of somebody's innate learning agility via online assessments and measurements. And then secondly, asking, within the context of an interview, asking structured interview questions around the concepts of learning agility.
Thanks, Benjamin. I'm going to keep you on that hot seat. A slightly related question. Somebody has asked, what weight do assessments count in recruiting? And I don't think the person's asking for an actual weighting, but maybe just some thoughts around, what sort of weighting should you give to assessment versus other processes?
So the thing with, when assessments are used correctly, they give the most objective perspective. So what I would say is that I would take the results of assessments quite seriously and balance them with the subjective perspectives of, is this somebody that I can get on with? Is this somebody that I can work with? But yeah, I would say that the weighting of assessments would be a relatively significant part of decision making. But an assessment is just a measurement on a computer screen, so it can never completely give you a perspective into an individual. What it can do is it can show you or highlight some traits that you can then use that information to your advantage further on in the interview process.
Great. Thank you very much, Benjamin. Sticking with this theme about flexibility and so on, let's take it from the employer point of view now. And somebody has asked us, how can we as HR professionals communicate the importance of flexible work for candidates to the C-suite during a time where many companies want to move back to the office? And I imagine this is something that you need to deal with quite regularly, Cindy. Any thoughts on this?
Absolutely. I think we all remember what happened to Elon Musk. He sent that memo to his staff. He said, if you don't come back to the office, you can pretend to work elsewhere. And that didn't go down well at all. So I think if anyone here is an HR professional, you're probably in the middle of you kind of in the middle of representing the company, but also representing the interests of staff or candidates. And I think we have got to a point of no return. I think if companies are wanting to hire scarce skills and they are stubbornly refusing to not have any elements of flexibility or autonomy or freedom, they are going to they literally are shooting themselves in the foot. So I do think, I think what's going to happen is companies are going to start seeing that they actually aren't attracting the best possible people. And then they're going to start investigating why. And I think it's going to come up quite often. But just one comment I'd like to share is that obviously certain roles are not flexible, sadly. You need to be present. There is no other way of doing that role. But where there could be some flexibility, I would encourage the employers here to actually ask their staff, what does flexibility mean for you? And I'll give examples. In my company, one person wanted to come into work 20 minutes later because the morning rush was horrific, and then they wanted to work 20 minutes later. It was such a simple thing, but it's been a game changer. So I think sometimes we think everyone doesn't ever want to return to the office. And I think it is about meeting people halfway. Like I said earlier, work doesn't have to be a destination or a place. Work is something we deliver. So I think we have to ask ourselves, are we glorifying presenteeism rather than focusing on outputs and results?
Yeah, I think we really need to look at what are the needs of the individuals weighed against the needs of the organization. But at the same time, I think not to minimize the value that contact has, being able to see your team members and work physically with your team members rather than just seeing them on a screen. Thank you very much for that, Cindy. So a new concept that I came across in the course of this webinar, I know this concept maybe previously as being passively disengaged. Now I see it's being called quiet quitting. We've had a question around quiet quitting. So somebody wants to know how to identify it and limit the impact. Cindy, would you like to comment for us?
Yes, sure. Yes, it's become a major phenomenon. And I think what's happened is, you know, I think COVID brought on a very extreme response from employees. One was either people went underground and you didn't see them except for compulsory meetings. But I think for a lot of people, they actually worked significantly harder and you know, just for fear of you know, losing their jobs or just really wanting to show that they were adding value. And I think what's happened is a lot of people have reached a little bit of a burnout where they've gone, how is this working? This isn't working for me. And I think they've realized there is more to life. So a lot of people are pushing back, and I'm not talking sabotage. I'm just talking about reclaiming their lives. So what it means is, you know, they do their jobs, they do it well, but then what they're not going to do is answer their phone at night. They're not going to, you know, if their director or manager messages them or emails them over the weekend or down at night where they might have responded. I think what they're doing is they're trying to create boundaries and where they're saying, what is fair for me? You know, I've always given and given and given, and now I need to reclaim my work-life balance, whatever that looks like. Obviously, some people have extended a little further where they are, you know, maybe being quite stubborn in the workplace and not, you know, maybe not giving their full value. But I think that would be the minority. I think for most people, they've just realized that maybe for too long, that work is life, life is work, and it's been blurred. And they feel that they've suffered as a result on a personal level, and their families have resulted in, you know, have been affected. And also what I'm finding as well with my clients, most clients are saying it's busier and busier and busier, and people are just working harder and harder. And I think people are reaching a point where they're going, this is unsustainable. Something needs to change. And for a lot of people, it's been the fact that they've drawn a line in the sand and said enough. So it's an interesting phenomenon. I'm not sure where it's going to lead to, but I think boundaries are important, but it's all at once. It's like a perfect storm.
I think I can maybe just add to that. I think one of the most important ways of dealing with quiet quitting and you know, becoming disengaged is feedback. It's very important to create that environment for feedback, to listen. So we need to get feedback, we need to listen, and then we also need to actively do something with that feedback, because it's now a reciprocal loop. We need to listen and we need to act, and we need to make sure that people's needs are met in the role and that they are comfortable doing what they do. And like Cindy said, it could be something quite small that can make a big difference.
Yeah, thanks for that, Benjamin. You've actually partly answered the next question that I wanted to pose to you and Cindy, which is, how do you create and maintain a great company culture with remote working? What are some of the ways to maintain engagement when it comes to remote working? So you mentioned one of them. Any other ideas, Benjamin?
I think it's very important to maintain contact. So culture is a shared experience between people, and it's very important, however the remote organization is structured, to have ways that we can communicate, that we can collaborate, ideally that we can see people. I like the idea of coming to the office sometimes. Some organizations are purely remote, and then what is needed is, you know, it's needed to create those online events or those face-to-face spaces where we can actually then really experience that interpersonal culture.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. We have time just for one last question, and maybe let's just reflect on, you know, the very medium that we've been using. The question is, what is everyone's general feelings on Zoom or virtual interviews? We found that it puts the candidate at a disadvantage and are typically not ideal. Any suggestions, tips or tricks for making it a viable and fair option?
Jaintheran, from my side, most of our clients are doing first interviews via Zoom. It is very, very efficient, and I think it's definitely not going to go away. I think a lot of people are doing those first interviews via Zoom. It saves a lot of time. I think where we've seen candidates at a disadvantage has been those candidates who don't really understand Zoom. So, you know that first 30 seconds is paramount for creating a great first impression, and you've got somebody fumbling along and there's noise in the background. So yes, I think as candidates become more savvy with technology and, understand, the importance of that professional approach, I think they're going to find that Zoom interviews are actually quite viable as well for them. It's very hard for some people to get out of the office and take time out of the office to travel to interviews, whereas this could happen in a lunch break or a tea break even. So I think Zoom is the way to go, especially as the first step in interviews. And I would encourage candidates to practice, to download Zoom, to work with Teams, whatever it is, and just understand 4 or 5 of the basic rules of Zoom interviews in terms of where do you look, how's the screen placed, who's in the background. I think those are important elements, but I think it's here to stay.
And perhaps the organization could also do something in the way of preparing the candidate, maybe a briefing or some information shared beforehand so that the candidate is prepared for the Zoom interview.
I think that makes sense. Definitely.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Cindy. And we've actually reached the end of our time. The time has just flown by. And I realized just looking at the comments and the questions that, the experts are not just on our panel, but the experts are also our attendees as well. We had such insightful comments and questions. Thank you so much for your participation. We definitely will get back to all of you. We definitely will make sure that those books that Cindy has so generously given to us will be distributed and will find their way to the lucky delegates that will receive those. That's unfortunately all the time that we have for today. I'm just going to give Cindy and Benjamin 2 seconds each to say bye before we have to just click on end webinar.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to chat to all the delegates, and I'd be very happy if anyone wants to email me. I've put my email address in the chat, cindy@proappoint.co.za. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity to meet everyone online. Thanks so much for all the questions. I can't wait to spend some time reflecting on all the questions and insights that have been flying through the panel. I found this to be extremely engaging. Thanks so much for attending, and we hope to see everyone at the next one. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Benjamin. Yes, we look forward to hearing from all of you. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.